Guys, today we have good news for you. What SpaceX, all the space unions in the United States, and SpaceX fans worldwide have been waiting on for a long time has finally come out positive. The good news is, the Starship launch permit that the FAA has been delaying reviewing is now finally approved. And we say hooray and congratulations to SpaceX and all the SpaceX fans worldwide who stood with us to this point. Today, we'll have an enticing discussion about how SpaceX went through the hurdle and saw the good and ugly just to get the Starship launch permit approved. We'll also talk about some conditions that the FAA is forcing SpaceX to fulfill while launching the Starship. Stick with us in this video as we paddle on. The recent good news is worth what we all should celebrate. After all, who wouldn't be happy to watch hundreds of starships fire up from the ground and sail through the sky to orbit? It will be an epic sight to behold, right? Yes, of course it will. Very soon, we will no longer daydream about traveling to space. Rather, it will be our everyday reality. We could vividly remember how SpaceX was worried and, at a point, got frustrated because of all the efforts, struggles, and most importantly, financial investment that was vented in the Starship project to lift it from the Earth into space, the Moon, and Mars was gradually being flushed down the drain since construction was continuously ongoing, yet the FAA keep delaying SpaceX's approval to launch the giant Starship into space. It got to a point where Elon Musk became discouraged and was almost giving up on the launch site at Boca Chica, and he decided to relocate Starbase. Then, he stated that SpaceX plans to ultimately move Starship operations to NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida, where the company is building a new launch tower and already has all the permits required for orbital launches, despite the FAA's delay in approving the P. Elon Musk has initially claimed that he is certain that his new SpaceX Starship, which was developed for Moon and Mars missions, will reach Earth orbit for the first time in 2022. Musk made this statement back in February. We're all aware that Elon Musk frequently makes crazy boasts. Although we had become used to not accepting his claims, until recently, things began to move closer and closer to becoming true. Thank goodness, right now, the FAA has finally given the green light for SpaceX to launch the Starship into space on a condition that the P will only be effective after SpaceX completes a total of 75 mitigations to reduce the launch impact on the Boca Chica environment and the entire public. Explosions and testing that take place at the SpaceX launch site have the potential to endanger local wildlife species by directly injuring or killing them. The United States Fish and Wildlife Service, USFWS, and other organizations have expressed concern that the heat, pressure, and debris resulting from launch testing, which began in 2018, could cause injury to animals to drive them away from their essential habitat. However, the FAA is ultimately responsible for deciding about SpaceX's effect on the surrounding environment. This was one of the reasons why the FAA had cold feet to give SpaceX the go-ahead to launch Starship into space, because they don't want to endanger the life of animals that lived around the launch site. The Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, stated that as a consequence of the requirements, launches will be given more advanced notice to avoid highway closures during launch operations. Additionally, launches will be prohibited on 18 specific holidays, and launches on weekends will be limited to no more than 5 per day. The FAA mandated that continuing vegetation and animal monitoring be performed, in addition to providing early notices to neighboring communities regarding the possibility of engine noise and sonic booms emanating from the launch site. The assessment was carried out by the United States Department of Transportation's Federal Aviation Administration (FAA), the United States Department of the Interior's Fish and Wildlife Services (USFWS), and the United States Department of Commerce's National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration (NOAA). The purpose of the evaluation is to verify that spaceflight activities are carried out safely and to evaluate any potential environmental consequences that may be suffered in the area. The huge list of the mitigations and precautions that SpaceX have to abide by includes protect and preserve ocelot and jaguarundi habitat, increase northern aplomado nest sites, monitor for sea turtles, reduce impacts to refuge lands, monitor for sea turtles, birds and vegetation, and report annually to the service, monitor for lighting and stormwater and report annually to the service, reduce generator noise impact, maintain the facility and operational plans, coordinate decommissioning of the site with the service, establish a protocol to notify the service of direct take of a federally threatened or rendered species, and submit annual reports. SpaceX will also have to work with a qualified biologist on lighting inspections to minimize the impact on sea turtles and perform quarterly cleanups of the local Boca Chica beach, among other requirements. The company will also assist with the local education and preservation efforts, clean up the environment, and check the well-being of humans, plants, and animals around the launch site. The FAA also recommends planting trees and forests around the launch location to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. The US FWS has filed a 141-page Biological and Conference Opinion (BCO) report to the FAA that discusses SpaceX's possible effects at Boca Chica Beach and what the company may do to assist limit its impact on wildlife. The US FWS stated that the possible consequences of SpaceX Starbase activities on wildlife may be addressed with simple procedures, such as using Starlink to monitor animals 24/7 with solar-powered equipment. SpaceX will avoid damage to vegetated wetlands and wind tidal flats by situating the parking area mostly in uplands and finding, erecting, and siting payload and processing facilities away from wetlands, according to the company. Predators, habitat, food, and measures to promote and preserve Aplomado falcons will be better understood with the assistance of a Starlink satellite. The US Fish and Wildlife Service has even agreed to use solar-powered Starlink internet terminals to improve wildlife satellite monitoring. SpaceX will also be responsible for managing and paying for fundamental infrastructure upkeep and upgrading, which any functioning government should be doing. It must also coordinate biologists with state and federal organizations to monitor the impacts on the regions, animals and plants, and ensure that all launch equipment is securely removed from vulnerable ecosystems. In addition to a nearby beach, lighting in the area must be altered to decrease its influence on animals. The FAA's regulations also require SpaceX to keep off construction from the roadway near the launch site so that ordinary people can still visit the surrounding beach, park, and wildlife sanctuary. Elon Musk may have a good reason for wanting to build a massive rocket launch station near a wildlife sanctuary, but things happen. This may seem like a lot to some, but make no mistake, the FAA's decision might have demanded for a more comprehensive environmental evaluation, perhaps extending the time it takes Starship to get its figurative feet on the ground from months to years. The FAA will need SpaceX to get an orbital Starship launch license by showing the government that it fulfills the agency's safety risk and financial accountability standards, in addition to all the environmental requirements. However, securing an operator license or experimental permit could take weeks or months after the last P. Any such license or permit will be conditional upon completing all mitigation requirements established by the P. The FAA's regulations also require SpaceX to keep a minimum shutdown of a roadway near the launch site so that ordinary people can still visit the surrounding beach, park, and wildlife sanctuary. Elon Musk may have a good reason for wanting to build a massive rocket launch station near a wildlife sanctuary, but things happen. SpaceX will have a lot on its plate, but because Elon Musk and SpaceX have already won the contract to transport NASA astronauts to the moon, and Elon wants to prepare the Starship for orbital flight, he has no choice but to complete these mitigations to travel to space from Starbase. It's now up to SpaceX to decide whether to accept these precautions or not. If SpaceX refuses to accept these precautions in good faith, it ultimately means that they're also ready to go for all funds invested in constructing Starbase and the Starship. So which option would SpaceX be left with right now? Do you think it's still a good idea for SpaceX to abide by all these rules and launch the Starship into space at Starbase Boca Chica? You can also check out how 14 space organizations were forcing FAA to approve Starship's orbital flight test. Just click on the video.